This is Voice of America News, delivered to you by Educational News Broadcasting on behalf of VOA. Good evening, viewers. I'm Haesung Lee, a professor at Georgia Central University, and here's tonight's news. For the fifth year in a row, about 8 out of 10 Americans have unfavorable views of China, with many saying limiting Beijing's power is a top priority, according to a public opinion survey. According to the Washington-based Pew Research Center, 81% of Americans have an unfavorable view of China, including 43% who hold a very unfavorable view of the country. Pew Research Associate Christine Huang told VOA, quote, "China is becoming an increasingly powerful player on the international stage, and so it's important for us to track how Americans and people around the world view China and its actions, and to see how public opinion will shape or not affect foreign policy of countries." Political ideology and age were found to have a distinct impact on people's perception of China. Republicans are far more likely to hold negative views of China than Democrats are, according to Pew. Republicans and Republican-leaning independents are about twice as likely as Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents to hold a very unfavorable view of China and to consider China an enemy of the U.S., the report said. Conservative Republicans are more likely than moderate or liberal Republicans to hold negative views of China and view Beijing as an enemy. Meanwhile, older people are also more likely to be wary of China, with Americans over the age of 65 tending to hold more unfavorable view of Beijing. Pew doesn't look into why most Americans have negative views of China. South Korean calls to acquire nuclear weapons, which were subdued for the past year following steps to strengthen the U.S.-South Korea alliance, are once again bubbling to the surface ahead of the possible return of former U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump sparked concern last week after making comments that many Korean media interpreted as a threat to pull U.S. troops from South Korea. In an interview with Time magazine, Trump says Seoul should pay much more for U.S. protection from North Korea. Quote, "Why would we defend somebody? We are talking about a very wealthy country," asked Trump, who elsewhere in the interview said U.S. troops were, quote, "in a lot of places they shouldn't be." Trump supporters say his statements are simply a negotiating tactic meant to persuade South Korea to pay more for the cost of hosting approximately 28,500 U.S. troops. Trump, they insist, does not intend to abandon Seoul. On the other hand, conservative Korean newspapers have begun to publish articles reassessing the idea of South Korea having nuclear arms. A researcher at a government-linked think tank in Seoul who supports South Korea considering nuclear weapons said, quote, "Almost every research institute has a project on preparations for the Trump administration. If South Korea ever pursues a nuclear arsenal, the decision will come with massive economic, reputational, and regional security risks." Not only could the move upend South Korea's alliance with the United States, but it could also prompt others in the region to pursue similar weapons, invite international economic sanctions, and would almost certainly elicit a fierce reaction from China, according to analysts. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen argues that a fractured democracy can have destructive effects on the U.S. economy, an indirect jab at Donald Trump. Yellen delivered an address in Arizona last Friday using economic data to paint a picture of how disregard for America's democratic processes and institutions can cause economic stagnation for decades. Yellen, taking a rare step toward the political arena, never mentioned Trump by name in her speech for the McCain Institute's Sedona Forum, but she hinted at the former president's potential impact if he regains the White House. Her remarks serve as a sort of warning for business leaders who may overlook Trump's disregard for modern democratic norms because they prefer the former president's vision of achieving growth by slashing taxes and stripping away regulations. Yellen said, quote, "Democracy is critical to building and sustaining a strong economy." She added, quote, "Undercutting democracy undercuts the foundation of sustainable and inclusive growth." She pointed to a study suggesting that democratization increases gross domestic product per capita by around 20% in the long run. Yellen cited the insurrection on January 6, 2021, among others, as a threat to democracy. She described January 6th as a day when democracy came under threat as, quote, "rioters spurred on by a lie stormed the Capitol." Trump, who made false claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him, has been charged with conspiring to overturn the election among 4 criminal cases he's facing. He denies any wrongdoing. Well, this concludes EMB's 9 o'clock news for Tuesday, May 7th. The original news articles broadcast tonight are available on our partner Voice of America's website. Thank you for staying with us, and have a good night.